Welcome to yet another episode of the Leadership Lab by Dr. VK. Today I'm privileged to be joined by a fantastic, amazing young leader, Ntanda Mandui. But before I introduce her, coincidentally today I had a conference in the morning in which there were several presentations, but one caught my attention, not only because I knew that I was going to talk to Ntanda later, but it was just interesting, the statistics that this lady was giving us. So about 78 million digital jobs are set to be created in the world in the next coming years. But I think the question that she was posing was, are African countries ready to absorb or to create or to participate in the creation of those jobs? And then the other thing that she also mentioned was the fact that there's this fear among people that are working at the moment to say technology or especially AI is going to take over the jobs of people, the average jobs that we know, the things that we have always known, accounting and several other things, especially the entry jobs into the economy. But she said that, we have not really looked at AI from a positive perspective. We're just thinking that AI is coming to destroy, to disturb the peace and all of that. And then there's one thing that she said. She said AI is actually removing the blockages, those inefficiencies that have always been there within the economy. So AI is in actually enhancing our efficiencies as human beings. And also the fact that AI actually does make mistakes, and that's also the place for human beings. And also the fact that AI is actually creating new jobs. And those 78 million jobs are going to be new jobs that we have never thought that we may need them, but now we actually need them. What we need to do now, especially for Malawi, whose mean age is 18, that's an advantage that we have. So the question that we must be posing to ourselves is, are we ready to absorb those kind of jobs? Are we ready, or are we positioning ourselves to take advantage of that kind of wave that is coming to us, that is already here? So Tanda Mandu is someone that is tech savvy. She knows these things. She's a young entrepreneur. She has represented and Malawi at various platforms. And she has operated at the mix of technology, systems thinking, entrepreneurship, and development work. She's also a storyteller, but also a global leader herself. She has worked for the UN, the World Bank, Microsoft, and also other multiple organizations. And yet, one thing that is interesting about Ntanda, she's deeply rooted in Malawi. So she's a Malawian through and through. So Ntanda, welcome to the Leadership Lab.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vera. Thank you for having me.
So I would like to ask you the first question. I know that I've introduced you already, but tell us a little bit more about Ntanda. Who is Ntanda?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I identify as several things, but at the moment, well, I am a Malawian, I'm an African young lady. I am an entrepreneur at heart. I've always been an entrepreneur. I define as an entrepreneur as somebody who's a problem solver, somebody who is willing to always take chances and look at problems as not just things to keep us down, but opportunities to kind of create new solutions and new paths forward. I am a creative. I have tinkered around in the creative space. I wish I could sing. I can't. But in the other spaces of creativity,
I can sing.
Yeah, so I like the creative space. I run an innovation and the creative hub. We have a music program, of course, music for Malawi. So I think I'm a very curious young person, and I like to think I ask a lot of whys, and those whys are what have led me through my life and through my career.
Absolutely. I think we are going to delve deep into the whys and why you ask the whys. But there's something that you have mentioned there in your introduction where you're saying, I like to solve problems. And I think that's where entrepreneurship comes from. Do you agree?
I agree, absolutely. I think you can't be an entrepreneur if you're not in love with the problem. I think I was talking to one of my mentors at Michigan State from the Entrepreneurship Innovation Institute, and he said that, you know what, if your goal is to just be rich, there's so many easier ways to get rich. You don't have to become an entrepreneur. Like, entrepreneurship is hard. I think there's Jensen Huang, the CEO and founder of NVIDIA, and he said, if I knew how hard it was going to be to build NVIDIA, I would have never even started, because entrepreneurship is hard. So you really have to be in love with the problem you're solving. And that doesn't mean that it's one problem over your life. That problem can change. And as I have grown in my career, that problem has grown and improved. So that's the same for everybody. Like, you have to, whatever problem you choose, you have to be absolutely in love with it.
So would you agree that there's a disconnect between what young entrepreneurs are trying to do and the problem solving? Because I think if we talk about the problems that we're facing, not only as Malawi, but as an African continent, there are so many. There's an array of problems. Everywhere you look, there are a lot of problems in water, in housing, everywhere there are problems. But at the same time, people are trying to make money. They're trying to be entrepreneurs. But there's that mismatch between the problems that they're trying to solve and then the need for them to make money. So there's that kind of mismatch. They are maybe solving problems that maybe are not necessarily providing the solutions that the population needs.
I think when you're solving problems, you have to understand, as you put it, your market. And that's something that I have grappled with. So like when I came to Michigan State University, because I'm in Detroit right now, I wanted to build a business that was going to create solutions for Africa. And those solutions look very different from what solutions for America look like. Then I got a tech fellowship, a residency with the city of Detroit. And I moved to Detroit in March. And since March up until now, all I've done is do research about Detroit. Because if I just come with an abstract idea and I say I'm going to create tech solutions for Detroit and I don't understand Detroit, as you say, I might create solutions that the community might not need. The tech solutions that I would create for a space like Detroit, where the infrastructure is advanced, there is stable electricity, there is stable internet connectivity, the tech solutions are more advanced, also just very different. It doesn't mean that the entrepreneurial opportunity is different. Maybe the data might show us differently, but I think what changes is the kind of solution we create. In Malawi right now, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to get into tech, great spaces to invest in are spaces like energy, even internet connectivity still has a long way to go. So from an entrepreneurship perspective, from a user perspective, yes, it sucks that Malawi doesn't have stable power. From an entrepreneurship perspective, that is amazing that there's an opportunity that you can actually get into the energy industry. Yes. Because when I talk to people in like Kenya, they're like, oh no, our energy is stable. Like, you can't even think of creating a business in that space. For as long as Malawi doesn't have stable power, that is an opportunity for young entrepreneurs to create solutions in that space. So yeah, I agree that we might be trying to create solutions that might be too advanced. For example, like my company right now is talking about building cyber physical infrastructure. To even be able to say those words means that I'm somewhere where the tech has advanced so much that I can create that. If I was to take that and I come to Malawi and I'm like, I'm going to build cyber physical infrastructure in Malawi, there will be that.
No one is going to listen to you. You're just going to think like you're speaking Greek to us.
Exactly. It's like, what are you trying to say? So even when I talk to, because I work with the Rockefeller Foundation, I'm a Big Bets fellow. And at that point, it's like, okay, if you're working in Africa and also the Americas, the solutions have to be different. So even in my own company, we have Fragments, which is the Africa serving arm. And then I'm newly building an American facing business model. And those business models are absolutely completely different.
Okay. So at what point did you realize that you are actually an entrepreneur at heart and then trying to navigate all the spaces? And then now the way you're talking is, it looks like you're creating something that is global. So it may work in Malawi, it can work in Europe, it can also work in Africa, in Malawi in particular as well. So at what point did you realize that you are actually an entrepreneur at heart and that you could do all these amazing things that you're talking about?
When did I realize I was an entrepreneur? That's a good question. I would say the first time that I knew what the word was, because first you knew like businessman, right? And usually the word is businessman. It's not usually businesswoman. It's when we're trying to be inclusive that we bring in and we say businesswoman. Then I came across the word entrepreneur and I was trying to understand what's the difference between a regular business person and an entrepreneur. And I've done 2 master's degrees. One is in entrepreneurship, one is in business administration. And I feel like that also crystallized the difference between what it means to manage a business and what it means to get a business off the ground. So for me, when I was in undergrad, I knew that I would always look at opportunities and always want to create something. So I'll give you an example. Like, I have always been obsessed with African hair and how we can grow African longer hair. So I would braid my own hair, and other people would be like, "Oh, you braid your own hair? Can you braid me too?" And then I started braiding other people, and I saw an opportunity, and suddenly I was busy. I had almost a person I was braiding every other day. And then I was walking around town because I'm from Mangochi. So to go in downtown with my mom, we saw this shop and we saw this nail polish bottle, and it's called Sinful Colors. That was my first like leap in making a lot of money. So I saw this bottle of Sinful Colors, and I was like, wait, this bottle looks very original. Then I went online and I looked it up, and it was actually original. So I realized that it was one of those in South Africa. They were actually original ones. They were selling a bottle 4,000 kwacha at the time for about 150 kwacha. I went to that shop because they were selling at just 150 kwacha to just buy one. I told him, I'm like, what is the stock you have? And he was like, oh, this is how much I have. And I said, give me everything. And I cleaned his whole stock. It was a whole sack bag. And I took the whole sack bag and I went with it to school. When I went to school, everybody knew what the brand was, and I was now selling something that I was buying at 150 kwacha at 4,000. I made insane money. Imagine a whole sack bag of that, and I bought it at 100. I asked my mom for some money.
You made an insane.
The profit margin was insane, and that's when I got into business, and I was like, wait, this is fun. So with the hairdressing, and then the nail polish selling, there was a salon on campus, and I bid to own that and manage that for a year. I owned that. That's when I started to realize that as time was going, when we were graduating, everybody was like, I want to go find a job, I want to work in the government and all of that. And as much as that was great, I was like, I want to run my own business. I think I want to build my own thing. So that was my first entrepreneurial experience. And I think most people, because you think about, you just...
So literally, I think you saw an opportunity and then you utilize it. So for me, I want to think that I think everyone, each one of us, every single day we are presented with those kind of opportunities. However, because they're not written, they don't have your name on it, you don't think they are opportunities. Like, I don't think that you had planned to go into that shop with your mom and then find that bottle. And then that kind of inquisition to say, I really want to find out what this is. You go online, you find out the credibility of the thing, and then you see it's original, and then you understand to say, people actually don't know. And so was you is a brand, but you knew what that brand was, and then taking advantage of all of that and then making a killing out of it. So I think for me, what you're saying there, as much as that would sound, maybe that was on a small scale, what it did is the lessons that opportunity, however small it was, the lessons that you built and the lessons that taught you that would become now fundamental even as you're building a global business. I was talking about the lessons that scenario gave you later on in life now. I mean, you're working with your mom in town, and then you see this product, and then you go on the internet to find out what it is, and then all of that, and then eventually you're making a killing out of it. That for me is fundamental, in that opportunities are all over around us every single day. The universe presents us with those kind of opportunities. However, when your eyes are not your eyes are not open, and then your mind is not in sync with that, that area of interest, you may miss them. And then also, I think young people thinking, opportunities need to come, in a big, announced on the radio, on TV or something like this. And yet opportunities can come at any point, and it has to come in a box presented to me by DHL and all of that, So I also wanted to ask you something, to say now that you have navigated all of that, there's the issue of competence, and then age, and then gender. You are female, you're young, and then have you ever experienced those kind of issues where, as a young leader, as someone that is trying to build something for herself and for Africa, and I think I want to believe that you're also building something for the world. You're creating all of these things for Detroit. My dear, Detroit is in the USA, so you're trying to create something for them that they're going to use. How have you navigated those issues around your age, your competences, and then for people to trust you that you can actually create something that they can use?
Absolutely, and that's something that I navigate every single day. I think also coming to the US, because in Malawi, it's like, especially when I started my business as a tech hub, I think at the time I was like 24, 25. So there was the youth in it, there was the gender, and yeah, I think mostly it was youth and gender. Now you come into the international space, like, and I'm in America for the first time, I'm seeing myself, I'm like, okay, first I'm a black woman, I'm seen first as a black woman, then I'm African, then of course I've gotten a little bit older, so the trust has kind of grown, but I'm seeing all these layers with which, and I always say, like, there is a saying that says, if you're going to approach life, like, approach it with the confidence of a mediocre white man, because a white man is not guessing whether he belongs. The way society is structured, the white man already
know.
they belong, the world was built
They
for them,
know.
you know. So
Yeah.
a big part of that was for me now to recreate the space and choose how I show up. So I'm like, okay, the identities that I have, I'm going to show up proudly, you know, because now I'm representing because for me, I'm like, I think about the young black girl, you know, that was, and I'm sure you have that in you,
Yeah.
like you're one of the young ministers that Malawi has had. And it is that to say, okay, there's that young girl that is looking at you. Now you're breaking a glass ceiling and they're looking up to you. What does that look like? So the barriers
Yeah.
are absolutely there. I know, like, for example, like I have interns working with me in Detroit. And I'm like, when you're going to tell your parents that you're interning at a tech startup, immediately your parents' mindset is it's a white man or it's an Indian man that has a tech
Yeah.
startup, right? When you tell them that,
it's not only a black girl, but she's a black girl from Africa
Exact-
and lives in this unknown country.
yeah.
And I really, really
Like, where is that again? And imagine what the parents, like, you're breaking
Yeah.
something in their mind where they're like, where are you going to be interning?
Yeah.
Are you insane? Did I send you to school for that? Really? Are you serious?
Yeah, so there is that which you have to navigate all the time. And I'm like, okay, how do your parents feel about that? And they're like, oh no, they were shocked, but then they also kind of bought into the story. So there's both sides where in the immediate term it's surprising. And then afterwards it's like, oh, that's actually kind of a cool story and I want to support that. So it's both ways. In terms, you talked about competence. And for me, like when I got into the tech industry, because I talked about the first phase, which was up until graduation. After graduation, now I moved to Lilongwe City. So when I went back home first, I told my parents, I'm like, guys, I'm going to Lilongwe. So I went to Lilongwe. I didn't have a job. I was like, I'm going to figure it out. I have a blog. I want to do something. So when I got to Lilongwe, I started blogging. I was writing about my journey as I do up until today. And I'm still blogging and writing. And at the time, I was like, I'm just going to blog. And then I saw some other young people that were like, we also want to have a blog and a website. How can I create my own website? I'm like, oh, I can teach you. Then I realized the demand was growing and suddenly there were 10. And I was like, oh God, we have to do this as a cohort. I can't do one-on-one. So we created a cohort and then eventually we had a cohort of 30. And at the time, then the Digital Malawi project came to Malawi with the BPC and the World Bank. And then they were like, oh, we are trying to get more young creatives to train more digital skills. And at the time, I was like, oh, no, I was trying to train like just 30. I was looking at like, maybe if I can even get a $10,000 grant, that was going to be great, like amazing. And then the World Bank is like, oh, no, this is a $250,000 grant. And at the moment, I'm working at the Malawi Revenue Authority as a revenue collector. My salary at the time is about $400. So you're asking me to move from $400
And I'm like,
to managing a
Are you
$250,000.
serious?
Exactly. So my mind was just like blown, and I'm like, how do we go about this? So immediately, when you talk about competence,
Tanda, I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there because there's something that I want to accentuate from what you have just said. Something like I was talking, I think, in another forum where I was saying when I finished college at Chancellor College, I would leave and I wouldn't even have any money for transport. I would leave my sister's house. I would go into town, walk, and then visit about 8 to 10 companies every single day, giving them my CV, giving them my application letters with unsolicited, And I was saying that I wanted to believe at that time that I was putting into motion something within the universe. My spirit was ready to work, which is exactly what you did. You left Mangoji to say, I don't know where I'm going. What I know is that I don't want to stay here. What I know is that I'm going to figure it out. What I know is that I think there's something for me there. Now, because you had already started doing this, you're creating, you're teaching these people, you're doing these things for yourself and whatever. The World Bank, the World Bank, or whoever gave you that opportunity for 250,000, that was set in motion by what you were already doing, which is something that young people need to know. You just can't say nothing comes out of nothing. Yes. I mean, something has to start. When you start it, the universe absorbs that energy from you. And then when that opportunity comes, you know, this is for me, which is exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think it's like for every single, and I think because people are like, oh, how are you just not scared to start? And I'm like, no, the thing is, I've started so many times not knowing where I was going. And I realized that I didn't die, so it's like, oh, I'm going to Lilongwe, and I get there and I don't have a job, and I'm like, because people want security, right? I'm not going to move until I have the job, until I have the financing. Like,
Security is safer. Security is comfort. But then
of course,
no one ever, you don't go to greatness with comfort.
it doesn't take you anywhere. So like even when I came, so I was talking about like competence. As soon as I knew that I was going to run a tech hub, I knew that I did not have the skills or the actual like knowledge to manage a team. I enrolled in my first Master of Science in Entrepreneurship at Must. I learned a lot from that phase. When that was done, I knew that I also still didn't, I was missing something. So I enrolled into my MBA at MSU. When I came to Michigan State, I had
So two things that you are saying there. Number one, you knew what you didn't know. So one of the things that I see in the people that I mentor is that they think they know everything. They have one degree, one first degree. They are already ready to take over the world. Then they know everything already. So you need to be honest with yourself, because what you're saying is you knew. So it means you critically and objectively analyze yourself and your skill to say, I know how to do this debate. I don't know. I need to get this. So even after you get that master's, you say, I don't think I'm there. I'm there yet. I think that kind of honest conversation with yourself, I think is very critical, and a lot of people don't have those.
Yeah. No, a big thing. I think for me it's also self-awareness. So I think when I was younger, I was very confident, When I finished my undergrad, I was like, Dad, I'm done. I never want to do a degree again. I'm going to do my business. I know everything I need to know. When you're young, you have that naivety, right? As you grow, the world humbles you and you start to appreciate how much you actually, because you start to see how expansive it is. So like even right now, presently, I'm reading this book called Capitalism and Its Critics. And it's taken me back into history from the beginning of capitalism all the way through like the setup of businesses, when wage paying labor was established, all the way to the wars. And as I'm reading this book, I'm like, oh my gosh, I still don't know so much, In that moment when you're absorbing information, and for me, like right now, I'm applying for my PhD, and all the while people have been pushing me like, oh, Dad, do a PhD. And I was like, I'm not going to do a PhD just to do a PhD. I want to do a PhD at a point where I'm like, there is that which I don't know, which I'm going to go look for, So that's kind of the phases for me. So like as young people, we're very, I would say, confident in our knowledge. As you grow, you start to see how big, and as I travel, I'm like, oh my gosh, I still don't know so much. And then that's when your world opens up. And also the humility. I think I just did a TED Talk and I talked about ego. My TED Talk is about ego. And I said the biggest thing is knowing that I don't know everything, and that I can learn, because once we start to think we know everything, we have to defend that thing to say, I know this one thing and it is this. But if I'm open to say it can be anything and I can unlearn every day and relearn, then we kind of absorb no knowledge.
Exactly. So I think one of the things that I wanted to learn from you would be so as we're building those businesses, as you were going into your journey, and then you're a young person, young people, you have all these pressures that are coming, a boyfriend here, you don't have money for that, there's that, all the pressures that young people go through. What are some of the sacrifices that you had to endure, or some of those challenges that you had to, navigate for you to get where you are now?
I feel like I have a challenge every day. I feel like I have to endure something every day. Like for example, even presently, at risk of oversharing, I am in the US, but I'm in between transitioning from graduating to starting work. And I need to have an employment authorization card. Because of the Trump administration, they have put a pause on 39 countries that are banned. Malawi is yellow banned because apparently Malawi have a history of overstaying their visas. So that is a pause right now. And that is a challenge that I'm navigating in present day. So I just want to showcase, like, it's not just about like, oh, way back when. Like every single day there's a new challenge. Like when I was finishing my my degree, because of the same pause and ban, my student loan was not approved because of that ban. Suddenly I had to reach out. Thank goodness that the head of the Africa Studies at MSU is in Malawi, and I reached out to him, Dr. Zulu, and I said, Professor Zulu, I don't have a student loan right now. I might not finish my studies. He put together resources. He gave me people I could reach out to. And MSU came through for me. So those challenges are continuous. When I went to when I just established the hub, I mentioned that I got $250,000. 1 year and exactly 2 months into running that, the UN hired me to move to New York. And I was like, I've just started this thing, It's 1 year in, I need to see
How am I supposed to do
how am I
this?
supposed to leave? And they were like, oh no, you have to go to New York. And I remember going to the EU ambassador to Malawi. He was kind of a mentor to me. And I sat with him and I said, what do? I don't know what to do. I have this grant that I'm managing that I know might go haywire if I'm not here, but I also need to go to New York. And he was like, well, if it's gonna die, then it was gonna die anyway. Take the risk and go. Also in New York, you will grow and you will learn. I would say the best part of me going to New York was that my team in Malawi suddenly knew that Ntanda is no longer here to run the show. Suddenly we have to grow up, and I saw my team step up to the table. So I ought to say that the challenge is like every single day. I wake up and it's a new challenge, and especially when you live in America and the Trump administration, there is something new every single day.
Yeah. So you just have to rise to the occasion. So you strike me as a very confident person. Have you ever, because this is one of the things that I've also had to deal with myself personally, the issue where scenarios where you walk into a room and immediately people underestimate you until when you open your mouth.
Even after opening my mouth, I think the underestimation, especially as a black woman, it's like ongoing.
Right.
And so for me, like I know that that's where I'm coming from. And also, like as I've grown and I get into spaces and like being at the UN, like my manager Anna was amazing, and she'd always give me opportunities to show myself or like speak at events when there probably wasn't space for that, which I appreciate as well from a leadership perspective. She gave me room to shine, and she said, "I've been in the UN for 20 years. I do not need the spotlight on me anymore. I want to put the spotlight on you." And she did that a lot for me. But whenever she did that, I was always anxious because I'm speaking and I'm aware that everybody here has like 20 years of experience, and I'm like new in the UN, and I'm telling you, but
That's starting.
exactly.
Yeah.
But she was like, you know what? You have a good story because you have actually run a program and a whole innovation hub on the ground. Like people need to know, because when you're at HQ, it's easy to just speak in the, as you say, the big words, the abstraction, the SDGs. Because when you speak about it as the SDG as a phrase or as a word, it's really, really great. It's like, oh, no poverty. It's a great mission to get behind. But it's like, what does no poverty actually look like on the ground? And it's like you have that space.
What does it really mean?
Yeah.
In Malawi, what does it really mean? How do you
Like this is
translate
what it
that
actually
into
looks
everyday
like,
life?
day-to-day life. So
Yeah.
for me, with the confidence, it has come from, I think, being sure about what I'm doing and being sure about what I stand for. When I talk about the innovation hub, it's very easy to get into just we do gamification, we do IoT, all of that. But when I come back and anchor it in that one little kid that came the first day and was scared to turn on the computer, to now 2 weeks later, and the kids had the greatest up-ramping, by the way. Like the kids, if they come in the first day, they're scared. By like 2 weeks, they're going onto YouTube, they're making things that are kind of amazing. So when I remember that kid, then it's easy for me to be confident about we run an innovation hub in Malawi, because I'm thinking about that particular impact. When it's kind of abstract, you kind of like, oh, we can't do that, we can't do that. But when I'm thinking about narrowly about that kid, it's like, it's clearer to me what the mission is.
No, thank you very much. There's as we were speaking about that kid that is able now to switch on the computer and all of that. There's one interesting statistics that I learned today that 60% of this report, there's this innovation index report. 60% of the respondents could not, they didn't know how to switch on a computer or use a computer. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a lot, and that's in Malawi. But then there's something that you said also that I wanted to focus on, the issue of mentors. I think you've spoken so much about mentorship, about my mentor this, my mentor that. Why do you think young people need mentorship or, role modeling and being anchored by someone that has, been in the path that you're on?
So what got me into the digital space for me was something like, a bit random, right? But being in that space, I started to see the digital divide. And that was my first master's research, talk about like the opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities in digital transformation. And just to see that space that, oh, we are so behind. And then I came to the US, and before when I was in Malawi, I was like, oh, we're so behind. And then you come here and you're like, oh, we are so behind. You see that gap and it widens and it widens. So for me, like, I want to push for that. And you talk about like people not being able to turn on a computer. Like the gap is so wide. Again, you talk about entrepreneurial opportunities. Those are opportunities for all of us to step in. The ones of us that have been educated and can see the world, know a little bit more. There's spaces to create businesses and create value around that. Now, when you talk about mentorship, I have benefited a lot from mentorship. My first mentor was undoubtedly, of course, my mother. My mother was educated in her right. She was the first female inland marine captain of Africa, first female marine captain of Malawi, and she knew the value of education. And from her, she was consistently teaching me, but not just me or her kids and everybody around us. And she was a big mentor, even though she never called it by name, but she was big about that. As I grew and as I went further, my parents were honest with me to say, we have brought you this far. This far, we knew what we could tell you. Going from here, you are on your own. But in my mind, it immediately looked to me, I'm like, I cannot be on my own. I can't do this on my own because I relied on you to know. But it's like, no, when you talk about you in the digital industry, this is where I end. Like, I took you to Chanko, and that's as much as I knew. Now you're talking about this digital space. You're the one that's teaching me. So now I started looking around. I said, okay, who is moving where I'm moving? Who's going where I'm going? And how can I create a relationship with them? So I talked about like the EU ambassador to Malawi, for example. When I don't know who nominated me at his office, but they had this event where they were talking about Malawi's power women, and I was the youngest. I think I was the only one under 40 invited to that EU event. And being in the room, I think there was like the speaker of parliament and everybody. That's like a big powerhouse. And then I reached out to him.
I think I attended that meeting.
Yeah. So then I think after the fact, I reached out to him after I had the offer from the UN. That's when I said, can I have a chat with you? So when I went and had a chat with him, I sat with him on his veranda. We finished the chat, and then he was walking me back to my car. And the thing is, he was anticipating one thing that did not happen. So he said it to me, and he said, Tanda, you're the first Malawian to come to my house, and you have not asked me for money. And I said, oh, okay, that is
Oh
interesting.
my God, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, and he was like, you're like the first at the time. He's like, you're the first Malawian to just come and ask for advice. And then he leaned into mentoring me. And that's the other part which I've thought and reflected on, because I'm like, because people are overwhelmed, like I'm sure you are overwhelmed by your DMs, everybody's asking you for something every single day. So I was like,
Every single day.
every day, and not to say that I don't have needs. I have needs. Like I'm saying right now, I'm like, I am in a transitionary period. I do not have a clear sense to say, where am I going to get my rent this month? But I also know that if I step to everyone and I'm like, oh, help me, help me, help me, I know until I'm desperate, they might not be willing to. Even when I talked about like at the time when I was at MSU and I knew that I wasn't going to get my tuition sorted, when I connected with the Africa Leadership Center at MSU, I came in with a mentality of how can I add value? How can I help? Because it was like, how can I give? And that's how I've seen that.
What is it that I have that I can use to get what I want?
Exactly. And at the moment, it's because I think I was talking to a friend. I said, by the time you think you have a need, it's a little too late because you haven't done anything for anybody else. So I've made it as a basic practice. Say when it comes to mentorship, because people come and they come to you and they say, here's who I am, here's what I need. But I think the better approach to mentorship is I come in and I say, what can I do for you? Because I see you as somebody who is valuable to me, that I'm like, okay, what do you need? And you, even as Vera, you have small needs, I think I remember when I was in New York, you saw my wig someday and you're like, oh, I like that. Where did you get that? And I was able to get that to you. Like, in a way, to build that relationship, to say that, okay, there will be a day when I need your advice and guidance on something. Also, not to be like, using people, but being intentional. Because I was talking to one of the young Malawians and I was like, be intentional about building relationships. Because she was asking me, she had to go to Europe for a conference, and all her cards were not working. So she reached out to me, and I advised her, and I said, you know what, you and I know each other, but the only time you ever reach out is when you need something. And I feel like we need to build this. Yeah, like we need to build. Exactly, because mentorship, as you put it, it's a valuable thing. I have like those valuable relationships. Like Anna Rosa, who was my manager at the UN, to this day, we're still in touch. We're still having conversations. Like for her son was graduating, and she was like, "No, my son is graduating. I need him to get on the right path. Can you have a chat with him?" And I was willing to give that because he gives to me. So a mentorship relationship is, not transactional. It has to be, a community really, and
it's a give and take.
Very valuable. Yeah.
It's a mutually beneficial kind of relationship, and it's built on respect and humility, like you said in the first place. So for me, I think this generation, there's something that is wrong, and I don't say that in a bad way.
Yeah.
Where people just want something immediately.
Yeah, it has to happen today.
As long as I have what I need today, I don't care what happens tomorrow. But then tomorrow you come back, and then you become toxic. You become a parasite because you only come when you want something, and then you're just feeding off of me. What is it that I can benefit from you? Because it doesn't mean, like I remember there's a certain lady that taught me about giving to rich people. I didn't think about it in that way. She said, this is my friend, she's a billionaire, and then her daughter was getting married, and then she was thinking, okay, how can I help this woman? She's a billionaire, she has everything. And then she just decided to go. She just took 2 bags of maize and went to the maize mill and did ufa, and took this this flour to this woman's house. And she was like, seriously, you know what? I actually didn't have ufa because there's people from Kumunzi that have come that they don't like rice, they don't like spaghetti, they don't like pasta and all of this. She was so grateful. Can you imagine as much money as she had, the one thing that she didn't have was ufa, something that she could make, but she didn't think about it, So this thing that you think that people don't have needs and all of that. And then, when you have someone that is coming to you for help, but they're also willing to give something, it doesn't have to be monetary. your heart is willing to give them back.
There is so much.
You are always available for them. There's so much that you can give, So just briefly, I want to talk to you about how do you think that Malawi is ready for the digital era? Because that's where we are going. We can no longer, AI is here, it's right here, So the future is technology. So to what extent do you think we are ready to put ourselves there, to position ourselves in the digital era as a country?
Malawi is not ready, far from the fact, but we are well set on the path. I say this as somebody who is teaching students at the Malawi University of Science and Technology. I get interns when they're working and learning from MUST. So we get 4 computer science and security students and business information technology students. And then now I'm kind of working with computer science students at UNIMA in my organization. And I'm seeing the skills they have, but also the gaps that they have. And I am concerned and worried. And of course, I talk to their professors. As I worked in the UN as an evaluator, I'm an evaluator by profession from the past. Even when I was in private sector, I said my work was still kind of evaluating what's working and what's not. So I'm always giving feedback, even when people don't want it. I'm always like, hey, this might not be working. What if we did this way? So even to Malawi, the feedback is we are not ready, but we are well set on the path. We have the programs. We just have to tweak them a little bit. I think one thing people tell me is one of the most rigorous programs in Malawi is at NACIT, IT that is at NACIT, because it's a really, really good program on there. And I have worked with a few from that space. I think one of the lead game developers on my team is a NACIT graduate and he did masters at MUST. So I see that. So when I see the gap, because when you talk about technology, it's easy to start at AI because that's where the world is. So, every single new wave, it's like, oh, blockchain technology, we're all there. AI, we're all there. Next would be cyber physical infrastructure. We're moving in that direction. But the question is, what are the foundations that need to happen for this to work? And when I say we're not ready, we do not yet have stable energy. You cannot think technology without stable energy. So we need to fix the crux of the equation, which is figuring out the energy equation. Once we have stable energy, then the next thing is internet connectivity. We need to figure out the internet connectivity because most Malawi, when I say these kids that I'm teaching at Master, I'm teaching them online. To get them onto a Teams chat, my God, it is the pain. First, there might not be electricity. Next is Airtel is terrible. So those are, this is not blaming, the energy providers or anything. It's all of us that need to come to the table and we need to all crack our brains together. And something that we've been talking about is Malawi is churning out a lot of graduates every single year. The question is, more of us are getting educated, but what are we doing with that education? And that's a part where we're like, we must all come together.
Exactly, what are we training ourselves in? Because it's another thing for you to get training. You're getting a degree.
Yeah.
What are you training in?
Yeah, that's a big one because right now I've seen, I analyze some of the programs. So right now I looked at what is MUST offering. I love what MUST is offering as a university. I think there was somebody who put a criticism on Twitter recently. I think it's called X now. That said that Luana is moving away from the agricultural scientific base and moving more towards social sciences. And in the short term, it makes sense, right? Because you're like, oh, we want you to get jobs with the World Bank and wherever, so a social science degree makes sense.
Yeah.
But if this is a country that is intentional about building its own solutions, we need people with technical skills. I said this as a social scientist, my foundation, my 2 masters have become more technical, and for my PhD, I'm going even more technical because I start to realize that if we're going to build this nation, we need people with serious skills. We can't have everybody that's just waiting to evaluate something. You can't evaluate what you don't have. We need to create the things.
Exactly.
So when I look at Malawi, we can get on the right.
I think what I'm hearing you say, is about democratizing access to the internet, access to technology. It has to be there, not because you went to Mass, not because you live in Lilongwe or you work in these big institutions. Everyone, as long as you are in this country, you need to have access to internet. So that's democratizing access to technology. And for us to get there, the steps that we must take must be intentional. They must be resolute, in terms of we are going to do this. This is the way we are going. So, and then there's just today, I think at tea break, at this conference, I met this gentleman. He is into connecting Malawi and other countries who are willing to provide. They donate medical equipment and several other equipments as well. And we were talking about, sometimes this equipment comes and then maybe 2 or 3 months down the line, it is now packed somewhere because that screw is not working and then it's no longer working. This equipment that can save millions and millions of lives in Malawi. And then he was saying that, but we have biomedical engineers and all of that. So I think a biomedical engineer sometimes would be there. And then they need to have some technical people that are, on the middle here to help them, because a biomedical engineer would understand what is wrong with an equipment, but it's now the technical person that would go and now you don't use that screwdriver, to fix that problem. So we need to intentionally train those people technically in those areas for us to harness the opportunities that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think also Malawi, and I'm yet to speak to the present leaders in the government. I know we just also had a government change, so I know everything changes up there. So I'm yet to speak to the new administration, is my point. The previous administration had kind of understood who's sitting where and what their visions are. But one thing I want to say is now having been in the US, like when you talk about Michigan State as a university, the programs that are being taught at Michigan State University, at University of Michigan, at Wayne State, all of them are co-created with industry. So industry says this is what we need. These are the skills we need. You need to teach your people in this. So when I talk about like my MBA is in supply chain management. That's just not an abstraction. There is a demand from industry that says, hey, we need more supply chain managers. Can you please train more of this? And that's something that we need to get intentional about as Malawi. We have not been, because when we talk about that, our degrees are being pushed towards social sciences. There's a reason. We're not training Malawians to build Malawians. We're training Malawians to be exported into international NGOs, because that's what we've seen, that this is what is working. So Malawi is still lacking, the basic industry, and that has to be intentional on our end.
So you come from Mangochi, for example. I come from Kadabe. Those are lakeside districts, okay? You should have a technical college in Kadabe, a technical college in Mangochi, teaching people how to do canning, for example, how to make boats that are, that use engines, You need to have technologies or industries that are around fishing, the fish industry, for example, because we are by the lakeside. And all of that, how to make those cans, how to manufacture those cans, how to manufacture preservatives that you require for you to keep fish for a long time, and all of that, and then maybe refrigeration and how to fix a refrigerator and all of the industries that are attached to that area. You cannot teach that to somebody that is in Sanje, for example. That's a hot area. There's no lake there, So for me, I had a privilege a couple of years ago to go to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is like a giant casino, and then we went to this technical college. I was shocked. Every course that is taught at that technical college is connected to the casino industry. So there's culinary arts, there's how to make those chips, there's how to do this, how to make those machines, how to fix those machines. Every course there is connected. So as a matter of fact, the lecturers there were complaining to us to say, you know what, we don't have students that are finishing because we have an 18 months course. Within 6 months, they're being absorbed by the market because there's a deficit of students here. I was like, oh, that is fascinating. I am coming from a country where 250,000 every single year they're graduating and they have no idea where they're going to work. And you have people here, they are enrolling on an 18-month course. Within 6 months, the industry already absorbed them, and then they will just say, oh no, you're going to teach them on the job, So I think maybe we need to, look at those things, and then technology is going to play a very, very big role in getting those things off the ground.
I agree. And I think, you talk about like the connection with the industry and all of that. And that is something that I think we need to push on as Malawi. So like, another book I was reading is called Apple in China. And I think Apple in China, I talk about it a little bit in my podcast as well. It goes deep into the history of how basically the iPhones and all the Apple devices ended up being made in China. Because, the majority of us, when you think about Apple, you're thinking, oh, made in America, right? None of the Apple devices, they said they designed the concepts in Cupertino, in California, but they're all made and assembled in China. And that, when you look at the history of that, I like what China did. Of course, it had to be the policy leaders that were at the helms of these organizations. So when China was kind of back then, it had figured out its manufacturing base. It started looking at what can we manufacture. First you figure out the base, which is building the industries, then training the human resource. And I think I liked Bingo's policies coming up towards that, which is how he built, like even bringing up MAST. There were gaps which he had identified, and he said, okay, we're going to build more technical people. So when you talk about like biomedical engineers, he had this model of what the human resource that will be needed to, after you build industry, you need the people to run this. After you have built industry, train the people, immediately after you need to bring foreign direct investment. Now, foreign direct investment is attracted by entrepreneurs, it's not just the government. So now we had entrepreneurs in China that would look at Apple as a problem. They're manufacturing in America, and they would say, hey, we see that you're doing this, we think we can do it better. That is literally how Apple started to move to manufacture in China. Like, okay, let's come and talk to you and let's see what you can do. That's something that African countries can do, to look at what is around the world and what can we do better in terms of our skills and what we have. So then you look at, like, for example, Michigan has a maritime industry. You talk about that, we have the lake. There is a whole lake that is an experimentation ground. How can we convince companies in the Americas to say, hey, what if you came and did your research and exploratory activities with our technical capacities that is here on the Lake Malawi? When you bring that, then you start to manufacture, and that's how they literally, over time, the Apple devices, the iPhone, the iMac were all made and assembled in China and then exported. And now you look at, I think the data actually said that about $8 billion of what is the revenue for Apple goes to China. And then now, not just that, they built their capacity, their technical capacity, and then there was, when you look at launch, you say, oh, how Huawei is copying Apple. Huawei is not really copying Apple. The people at Huawei worked at Apple and know how to make a phone that is of that standard, and that is something that we can do as Africa going forward.
Exactly. So I think the opportunities are enormous, like I'm hearing you say, for Africa, and I think we just have to strategically position ourselves in terms of also the problems that we're trying to solve for Africa, that are going to work for Africa. So Ntanda, that's where we leave it for today in part 1. I want to thank you very much for coming to the Leadership Lab with Dr. VK. I'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. VK. Thank you.